Hi, Kriegspielers. We're going to talk today about using the operations order logic to become a better Kriegspiel player. The operations order is a framework used by many Western militaries all around the world to prepare their forces for any type of operations, certainly combat operations, the most important part of that. So the 5-paragraph order, when you look it up online, will have these terms, and they're kind of abstract and they don't mean a lot to those of us in the civilian world. So things like service support and command and signal, it's hard to translate that into a Kriegsspiel game. So what I want to do is break out for you the underlying logic in the order with which an operations order is presented and prepared so that you can use it to play Kriegspiel more effectively. So here's the logical order of the order, right? And the logic is really important in terms of what you think about first, second, and third. So let's go over to the board. Here's a classic Kriegspiel board. And this is the kind of thing you'd find in most of our games. And you might have command of the blue here with 4 other players, and your mission might be to defend the town of Karsdorf from enemy attack. And the first thing that happens is there's a planning channel, and everybody gets together, and one guy says, "I'm the cavalry, and I'll go check things out." And he says, "I'll go up here," and then the guy says, "I'm the strong infantry, so I'll defend the town." And the third guy says, "Well, okay, well, I'll go over here this way," and then the fourth poor guy gets put in reserve, and he gets to sit most of the game in the back there, or something like that, right? And then the game begins, and enemy forces show up, and cavalry's running around, and all sorts of dispatches are being written, and the battle transpires how it transpires. I'm going to suggest that approaching planning this way is the least efficient thing you can do. And what you want to do is take your troops off the map, right? And follow the logic. And you can do this in a play-by-post planning channel, or you can do it live in 5 minutes. Okay, so for the first thing you want to look at is the terrain. Don't think about yourself, your own forces or the enemy forces. Look at the terrain. And what does that mean? So if we look at this here, in this small scenario, we'll pull up a green color for terrain, get our pen going, and we'll say, okay, if we look at this terrain here, we know we have to defend the town of Karsdorf, and we know that all types of folks can go the fastest along these roads, right? So these roads are the key to Karsdorf, and I just put a little one here to just show them. And this is why Karsdorf is important. It's because you got 5 roads coming to one town, and therefore Karsdorf is a critical road junction with a town around it, right? So that's one of the things. The second thing you look at is if you go to the left or right, you say, well, there's this river here, and that kind of blocks anyone from moving back and forth, and that river goes all the way up to here. So really anything on this half of the battlefield is kind of gummed up around that bridge. Therefore, this is probably not going to be good ground to fight in. The enemy's not going to go over there, probably, because they can't get across this river. These hills might play a role, but they're on the other side of that river. So that river becomes a really important part of the discussion. And these hills are really close to the town, and it would be advantageous to be on top of them to cover the town, but it would take a while to get there, so they would be less important. This hill, however, is interesting. And this one's even more interesting, because really a cannon up on this hill would be able to fire all the way down into here, right? And so if you see this open ground here, this is likely where some sort of fight might take place. Some sort of fight might take place here. You got these roads. And so already you're beginning to see, just by the first of 6 steps, that terrain begins to shape the battlefield for you. You can see how things are going to go. So keep that in mind, the river and those hills, as we go to the next step in the process. The next step is enemy capabilities and courses of action. What this does not mean is counting the number of enemy soldiers, because you can't know that. You won't know that until the situation develops. What you want to look at is the types of soldiers they have and what those soldiers are capable of, and the courses of action that might come from that, right? So in this very simple scenario, we have cavalry, infantry, and artillery. So we know that if we turn this to red for our enemy, Well, we know that cavalry can move quickly down these roads, right? Because those are your avenues of approach. So we would expect some cavalry as a course of action to come down these roads. Infantry also can come down these roads. The infantry fights well in here, okay? And the artillery could certainly shoot well from here, best from here, right? That's probably most likely. So in terms of enemy capabilities, you've got they can shoot artillery from here, cavalry can come quickly and check out what's going on, and infantry can move quickly down into this area here. So already by looking at terrain and enemy capabilities, the courses of action begin to become clear. So one course of action, we'll erase all our lines again. One course of action would be that the enemy puts some guns up here. They send cavalry in here and here. Let's make a slash there for cavalry. And then they have a big infantry force that comes down here to fight here, right? If they fight here and destroy us, they can come in and take the town of Karsdorf. That would be one course of action. Another course of action would be that they actually split their force this way and this way. They still put some guns here, but they try to push us out of the town this way and then have the second force hit us here, right? So that could be one force there and one force there. Those are two likely courses of action. A third course of action could be they try to sneak something in around us on this way to push us out this way, right? So they kind of make some noise here and here, but really their biggest force is coming down this way, even though this terrain is not as advantageous as this terrain for infantry. So we now have three potential courses of action. We have no idea which one they're going to adopt, but we can begin now to reduce the complexity of the battlefield by using our planning process. Next, we have to look at the friendly forces available, in which case then we would scroll back out and we'd have a look at our forces. Oh, I took them a little too far off the map there. Right, and you can look at our forces here. We bring them back up, and there you go. So you take a look there. We've got one heavy infantry unit here, and then two lighter infantry units of 3 half battalions each. We're missing a half battalion on this one, but that's okay. And then the cavalry, right? So that's what we have at our disposal. And now we go back and say, okay, that's what we have. What are we to do? Well, we're to keep the town of Karsdorf safe, so we know that's been clear all along. We want to keep the enemy from dominating the town of Karsdorf, no problem there. Let's get our glue going. Okay? And then next, 5. How are we to do it? And this is where it begins to get more complex. And this is where you can then dig into your planning. But you're now approaching what you have and how you're to accomplish your mission from a place of understanding the terrain and understanding the enemy courses of action. So one idea would be that, let's take the cavalry out of this for a second. Say, well, whatever we want to do, we want to make sure we have the heaviest infantry. We want to have 7 infantry lined up where most of the enemy come. So let's say, for example, that they come down this road here. We want 7 infantry there. If they come down and try to do something tricky here or here, we want 7 infantry there, 7 infantry there. But we don't obviously have 21 infantry to spread along all 3 avenues, so we have to actually move our forces accordingly. So the first thing we do is say, okay, well, how we're going to do this is we're going to make sure that we've got 3 infantry in the back, 4 infantry at one area, and I'm missing an infantry here because of my poor skills, but we'll fix that real quick. Okay. And then we'll put 3 infantry at the less likely avenue approach here, and we'll leave this unguarded for now. Right? So what this does is sets us up to react to what happens along the courses of action so that we end up trying to concentrate 7 infantry against the enemy forces. All right. So now you say, well, what do you do with the cavalry? Well, what the cavalry is going to do is their mission is to determine which avenue is the avenue that is the most important for the enemy. So you're going to send your cavalry out along these roads. And the cavalry is not to go charge infantry. It's to go out and figure out where the enemy is coming from. right? And so their whole mission is to find out where which road they're focusing on, so that we can actually put our 7 infantry in the right place, right? So maybe they do something crazy, like put cavalry up here with a nice field of vision, or field of view. Maybe they move the cavalry over here, something like that, right? So what we've done now is we've organized our forces in accordance with, in order, the terrain, the enemy capabilities and courses of action, and what we have relative to our mission, which is defending Karsdorf. Now, a critical thing here is, if you take all this and boil it down, we have created one major decision that we want to take in the how we are to do it. And that is to move that reserve to ensure we have 6 or 7 infantry facing their main effort, right? So of all the moving pieces in this small battle, we've got it down to one thing. Where do I put the reserve? This is good in a couple ways. One is it organizes all the communications, which is number 6, how we communicate at decision time. So how do we know when it's time to take those 3 infantry and move them to the correct place, right? And if we're sending dispatches every which way, and if we're talking about cannonballs here, or people are putting in long dispatches into, here's the status of my units, that's less important than where am I and where is the enemy, okay? So let's just walk through what that looks like if we do number 6 effectively. That's how we communicate at decision time. So if we know ahead of time, and we've briefed all the players, that our decision in this very simple game is to take these 3 and either move them there to create a group of 7, or move them here to create a group of 6 based on the courses of action, then all the communications are going to focus on, should you move those 3 or not? And then we let people know that if the unlikely scenario occurs, that they surprise us and the cavalry miss it, and somehow they work their way over this way, or somehow they kind of come over ground, or something really unusual, then we have a course of action that is just simply these 3 units become the lead, and then this group of unit comes over, we create the 6 over there. But since that's less likely, that should be our most complex decision. All right. So everything is very clear for everybody, and as they go to battle, they can then fight their local battle, knowing what matters to the overall group. And that's how we do it that. So here's where this pays off, more than just everybody kind of setting their units out at the beginning and just figuring out as they go. Where it pays off is if the enemy comes in strength down here, they try to put their guns up here, the cavalry knows exactly what to communicate. And we've got 8 battalions coming down this road, the guns are heading up to the top of the hill. Cavalry then knows their job is to report, so they fall back, they don't get engaged, and they keep reporting back. All good. In that case, the decision is taken, move the 3 here. We could even get cheeky and move a 4th. We could have a big, nice force there and have a nice battle there. Another course of action could be the cavalry could go up and deny this hill to the guns and kind of slow them down so the guns aren't able to fire on there. So the cavalry commander could take some initiative and do something like that. But ultimately, everyone's going to know why we're doing what we're doing and how it supports the overall plan. I'm not even going to draw the northern approach because a similar thing happens with the 3 going. And then we already talked about if they come in from some strange angle to the east, we can move over that way. So in the end, even though there's one decision to make, and there's a few iterations of that, it provides a lot of flexibility because the command group understands we're going to do one thing, we're going to shift this group this way or that way. And at the end of the day, if you're playing the reserve, you know that you are the critical factor that's going to weight the size of the forces accordingly. So this takes this order process and goes all the way through in 6 discrete steps and breaks it down to a couple of key decisions that you need to make. And I just made a little note. In a regular operations order, you see a lot about supply. Most of our games don't involve supply. If they do, you can add that back in. So this happens in our small battle on the board, but it happens in Grand Waterloo. If you really broke the thousands of units in Grand Waterloo down, and you look at the French plan, it was British were on the left, the Prussians were on the right. Keep the Prussians on the right until we can focus on the left and destroy them, and then we'll deal with the Prussians. That was the whole battle plan, right? So when you talk about reserve, critical, main effort, supporting efforts, and all these terms, what it really was is, keep the Prussians over there while we deal with the British here. Then we'll all go deal with the Prussians there. In the case of the Grand Waterloo, the Prussians came faster than the French had hoped, and the plan didn't come together, but it was very instructive. But the board looked like this that you see on the screen. Thousands of units, lots of stuff going on, lots of drawings and everything. But in the end, they were able to break it down to some very simple concepts. So if you learn those 6 steps and you apply it in your 5-minute planning sessions or your more detailed planning sessions in your play-by-post planning channels, it works to give you greater perspective, greater clarity, but also simplifying the decisions that your group has to make so you can all have more fun, be more effective, and play your Kriegspiel well. I hope this helped. We look forward to seeing you out there on the game board. Thanks so much.